Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank the team at GamesBeat and Dean in particular for providing us with this space to discuss the important role of STEM and STEAM education as a way to increase opportunities for the next generation of creators and innovators, especially those who have been underrepresented in our industry. I'm Stan Pierre-Louis, President and CEO of the Entertainment Software Association. The ESA serves as the voice and advocate for the U.S. video game industry. We have two extraordinary panelists for this conversation. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who represents the 9th Congressional District of New York, and Laila Shabir, co-founder and CEO of Girls Make Games. I will get to their bios in a moment. Today's discussion will focus on the role of science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, as well as STEAM, which is STEM plus the arts, given that video games bring together technological innovation and artistic excellence. These skills are critical to developments in our industry, but they also contribute to our national and global economy and create new opportunities for advancement into the workforce. Video games play a key role in spurring interest in STEM. In fact, academic researchers found that girls who play video games are 3 times likely than others who don't to get STEM degrees in college or in advanced studies. And what's really powerful is that learning game-making skills actually creates career opportunities in a broad array of STEM and STEAM fields because the video games and the arts and sciences they produce require skills that are highly desirable in adjacent fields like aerospace, coding, and more. In essence, video games serve as a gateway to educational advancement and a wide number of career paths. Today's panelists are champions of STEM and STEAM education and careers. They bring different perspectives on how to advance these goals, but each in their own right is making an enormous impact. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke represents the 9th Congressional District of New York, primarily central Brooklyn. Congressman Clarke is chair of the Homeland Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection, and Innovation Subcommittee, which is under the jurisdiction of the House Committee on Homeland Security. She's also been a member of the Congressional Black Caucus since coming to Congress in 2007, and today chairs its Immigration Task Force. Congresswoman Clarke has been a leader on tech and media policy and co-chairs the Smart Cities Caucus, as well as a co-chair of the Multicultural Media Caucus. She believes in smart technology, helping communities create sustainable, resilient, and livable lives, and she works to ensure that no communities are left behind. I'm proud to say that she was also my representative when I lived in Brooklyn. Laila Shabir is the co-founder and CEO of Girls Make Games. Laila was born in Pakistan, raised in the United Arab Emirates, and a graduate of MIT. Let's just pause on that for a moment. How impressive is that? Her pathway to Girls Make Games is an interesting one. And it really speaks to her commitment to give back while looking to build the next generation of innovators. What's interesting about her story is that she never set out to make games or get into this game space. However, as she saw the power of games and their positive impact on learning, especially for girls, she realized the connection between education and video games and how it needed to be formed. So in 2018, she received the Visionary Award from the ESA Foundation and has set a personal goal of teaching 1 million girls how to make games through her work. Welcome to each of you. Let me start with you, Congresswoman Clarke. First of all, thank you for making time for this conversation. There is so much happening in government. And as a member of Congress, you see a wide array of complex challenges to keeping America competitive economically and otherwise. How important is STEAM and STEM education in achieving that goal for American competitiveness?
Well, first of all, let me thank GameBeat and thank you, Stanley, for moderating today's panel. You've said it. At the heart of everything that we're trying to accomplish in Washington, D.C. is equity. And we know that equity implies human resource. And ensuring equitable access to a quality education in the STEAM fields and the career opportunities, the entrepreneurial opportunities that it leads to is essential for not only ensuring American competitiveness in the global economy, but also to make sure that our nation is prepared to meet the demands of the 21st century. I believe that we are in another industrial age, and all roads lead to tech and innovation and artistic ability. And so, at the sweet spot of all of that is STEAM education. It's estimated that 3.5 million STEAM and STEM jobs will be needed to be filled by the year 2025. So, combating disparities and removing barriers to equitable opportunities are a top priority for me in Congress. And I believe, as I've stated, that the new industrial age is already upon us and is going to grow exponentially in this century, and that all roads lead to technology.
You raised some really interesting points there, both about equity and opportunity, but also the fact that the jobs of the future will involve technology. And so bringing everyone up to speed in an equitable way provides new opportunities. I'm wondering if you might comment on the role the federal government can play in this, the role that you see private industry, and whether they need to really collaborate, or is it something that's separate, that private-public partnership?
Well, I think that there is a room for public-private partnerships. I think that it's actually public in a governmental sense, public in an activist on the streets sense, and the private sector as a partner in all of that. Because our technological infrastructure is primarily within the hands of the private sector. And if we're going to indeed pursue an equity agenda, an inclusive agenda, so much of that is within the domain of the private sector. We can, through government, really create pathways and corridors, incentives for the private sector to partner with us and making sure that every American, regardless of race, sexual orientation, home of origin, have an ability to access opportunities. We in government can be a training ground to a large extent because, of course, within our bureaucracy, we're going to need similar resource in terms of folks with the ability to guide us in the government technologically. Uh, but that partnership, where so much of the work is being done in the private sector, is critical. So there's a symbiotic relationship. And I think that we have reached that point where that recognition is clear, whether it is the performance of our social media platforms or it's the rapid adoption of telehealth, remote learning, remote working, um, whether it's the conversations around climate change and our race against the clock with respect to transforming to a clean energy future. All of this is predicated not only on what we can do in the government, not only what the activists raise as desires and issues and what they're doing in practice, but also the private sector and how we blaze the trail for the 21st century, inclusive of all of the talent that we're going to need to be competitive globally in the 21st century.
Laila, I thought I'd turn to you because the Congresswoman raised some really interesting points about the role technology plays and the importance of education and creating those opportunities, the role that the public sector can play in private. And you've taken that to heart by founding an organization that really promotes these goals. You've been a prominent voice and leader in creating STEM and STEAM curriculum and programs for young girls. And they're accessible, they're inspirational, they're fun. I thought you might share a little bit about your passion for this and why it's so important in shaping the workforce of tomorrow.
Thank you, Stanley. It's so nice to join here today on this discussion. Thank you, GamesBeat, for having me. I think, Stanley, prior to the call, we were talking a little bit about my childhood, and I think it's important to kind of reflect on where people come from, because that shapes who they become and how they view the world. And a lot of it, like you mentioned, I grew up in the United Arab Emirates. My parents are Pakistani immigrants. It kind of shaped who I was. At a very young age, I was painfully aware of the fact that I was a girl, that the world around me or the society around me had certain expectations of me, and that there were certain dreams and ambitions I wasn't permitted to have. I was just very, very fortunate, unlike many of my peers, that the minute I entered my home, I would have a completely different life. My parents viewed me and my brother and my sister the same. They didn't see a difference in how we should be educated, what dreams or careers or ambitions should be accessible to us. In fact, some of my most treasured memories growing up are, moments when my dad and I would kind of sit down and daydream. So we would dream about things like, what would you do if you were the prime minister of Pakistan? What kind of schools would you build? And how many hospitals would you build? So talking to a 10-year-old about building hospitals and schools and placing that kind of responsibility on your shoulder didn't just open my eyes to, like, these are things that are possible for me growing up, but also that, what should you do with the power or the leadership that you have. I think it's really important to empower our kids on two sides. So one, obviously, we are very committed to, making sure our kids are digitally ready. So they're ready for the roads leading to tech, as Congresswoman said. And I think that's absolutely non-negotiable. Everyone should be tech literate that's growing up now. Like, we need computer science in middle school, high school. Kids should be taking computer science as they would English language. So it's important to speak the language that the future is going to be built in. But on the other end, I think it's really important to teach kids that, anything and everything that they can dream of or they want to do is possible and it's within them. Because I think one of the things that really surprised me when I first met the girls at camp, because, I looked at America and I was always like, oh, anything's possible in America. And I'm sure that's how kids are growing up here. But when I went to camp and I talked to the kids, they would come back and say, I want this job or that job. And I was like, job? You're 12. You shouldn't say the word job. You should be like, what's my dream? What do I want to do when I grow up, and what kind of world I want to build? And I think the language that we use to talk to kids about what's possible and what problems we're going to build, because even the jobs that we picture today and the jobs that we might prepare them for might not be the jobs that exist in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We have to make them ready to solve problems. And to be able to solve problems, you need the technical skills, but you also need that confidence and validation inside you that, no matter the challenges, no matter the problems, I can come up with a solution myself. And I think that's what we focus on at Girls Make Games, is to give the kids both sides, the validation and the technical skills.
Laila, you talked about so many important things there. I'd love it if you talked little bit about the founding of Girls Make Games and maybe what you've seen since its founding. What has changed or what trends you've seen and where it's going? Because obviously, when you start an organization, it can be very iterative. You start with one idea in mind and you realize, oh, we can't have 14-week courses. They need to be 3-week courses, whatever it is. But maybe what inspired you to found it and what's progressed in that time?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really came out of, I was talking about problem solving. So it really came out of my own problem solving, because I was building a game studio. Met my husband and he really wanted to make games. I wanted to teach. So we combined our passions to make educational video games. And I was recruiting for my studio. I couldn't find women. And this is at a time when I was brand new to the industry. So I had no idea what the gender gap was like. So I'd go to conferences, I'd put up these job ads, and I ended up with myself and 7 male teammates. And I was just like, this can't be my life, like, I can't be the only girl at a female founded company. I've got to work harder. And the deeper I looked, the more I unsurfaced. Essentially, people come back and say girls don't play games or they're not interested in games. And here I was making a product that only boys were going to benefit from. So if I wanted to build, like we talked about equity, if I wanted to build an equitable educational solution, it has to be something that all genders can enjoy. So the first summer camp really was kind of a social experiment. I wanted to meet girls. I wanted to hang out with them and talk to them about why they like games or didn't like games, and obviously get them to also play test our product. But at the end of camp, it was just so obvious that it was something that was needed, because the last day of camp there were tears, and I don't think I expected that at all. It really threw me back. It became a home for the girls. They were like, I was the only girl in my robotics class. I was the only girl on my Minecraft team. In all of these places where they felt like they were the only one or they were the odd one out, suddenly at camp, they were surrounded by girls just like them. And it made them feel all powerful. And they could see all these pathways, like they could meet mentors who were in college, they could meet women who were already in the industry. So being able to see that was really validating. And at the end of camp, when they'd be like, all right, see you next year. And I was like, oh, okay, this is happening again next year. So 7 years out, the summer camp is still ongoing. We've continued to do virtual programs, we have workshops. We've expanded to nearly 100 cities worldwide. I've always had a very global outlook, being a global immigrant of sorts. That sort of just comes naturally to me. I think kids everywhere need access. Um, and we've published 15 games. So there was this joke that I make to the girls. I'm like, hey, I paused my game and it's still on hold. You're coming to my camp. I built this by pausing my game. One of you needs to grow up, become an engineer, come help me finish my game because you owe me that.
That's terrific. Congresswoman Clarke, you see a lot of attempts at solutions from the public sector and the private sector, and clearly there need to be opportunities at every level, whether it's pre-college, college, and internships and the like. I wondered if one or all these things impacts you as a path forward. What do companies need to be doing in terms of thinking about recruiting and investing in that next generation of innovators and creators, especially from underrepresented communities in a lot of industries, but certainly in our industry?
Well, the first thing that needs to be done once it's been acknowledged is to stop talking about it and do something about it. And I can tell you, as a STEM student myself, that we need to have an all around approach to providing the diversity and inclusion that everyone talks about ad nauseum. When I was coming up, it was about exposure. And the fact that in the city of New York, in the public schools in the 70s, we had science fairs. And as an elementary school student, the magic of science was constantly on display, and it didn't have a gender attached to it when I was coming up. I knew that I wanted to be a pediatrician, and so everything science intrigued me. I was curious about it. We need to create that curiosity at the base level with children. But beyond that, there are so many hidden figures that are already in these disciplines that everyone claims can't be found. I have to reject that notion and say that in many spaces, while it's not multitudes, there are individuals. And what I say oftentimes is, if you can't see it, you can't believe that it's possible for you. So to the extent that Laila is out there and showing what she's been able to accomplish and to achieve, there's so many young women like Laila, like me, that can see themselves in who we are and what we've been able to accomplish. So one of the things that I would say is that let's stop talking about it. I joke all the time. When I first came to Capitol Hill in 2007, I confronted, some of the sort of tech giants about the issue of diversity. I kept hearing this refrain from just about every CEO: we're going to invest in K through 12. And if what they said then were true, I've been in Congress 14 years. We should have a bumper crop of young women of every background in tech at this very moment. So that's what I say. Let your rhetoric match your actions, and let us all wrap our arms around the widening the aperture so that not with respect to your demographics, where you live, where you were born, your economic circumstances. We provide portals, gateways, pathways, and corridors for those scientifically inclined, or those who just need the exposure and that spark of genius to get engaged, to have access. And once we've done that, I think we are on our road to a more, as Laila said, technologically literate civil society. But not only that, the idea of innovation, entrepreneurship, and yes, jobs becomes something that is not remote, something that is not a far off notion, but becomes a reality in the lives of our young people. I tell my young folks all the time, if you can manipulate a smartphone, you can be curious enough to find out how it operates and then hack your way into creating a better smartphone.
Laila, Congresswoman Clarke talked about recognizing the issues, doing something about it. And one of the things you've commented on is that there are stereotypes around girls in gaming, and that's been an inhibitor, and it's something that you try to address in your programs. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on how you defeat those stereotypes and how you create that sense of belonging and community that makes the girls in your programs want to cry because you've created that sense of home for them, and the importance of really overcoming those stereotypes and disproving them.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of unfortunate that gaming has those stereotypes, but we do deal with it on two ends. I mean, we have the parents there's a lot of parents who will believe that video games are inherently violent or that the industry is not a friendly place for women, so they might actively discourage their daughters from pursuing this. And then we have stereotypes from the girls, and they're kind of doubled down from media and pop culture and things like that, where they'll think about, well, gaming is for boys, or it takes a tech or a math whiz to become a programmer who can make a video game. Or the one I think hurts the most to me personally, because I was on that side, is that gaming or game development is frivolous, which is that it's just something you make to have fun, or something that serves entertainment, and I want to do something bigger with my life. I want to solve problems. So the way we address this at camp, really, I like to talk about the latter one, because the first one, that the fact that you don't have to be a tech whiz to make a game, is evident when they make their own game. They're like, oh, I didn't know I could do it. That's great. But the second part, which is, video games and game development is just a medium. It's a tool to meet an objective. And just like any tool, it depends on how you use it. Entertainment is one of the ways that we've learned how to use it. And we've kind of been exploring that for a while. It's still a young industry. We're still figuring out what games are capable of. And you could do anything you wanted to do with a video game, whether it's inspire, inform, educate, entertain. And I think when we have that talk, there's a presentation, there's a light bulb that goes off at the end of it, because the girls just really take charge to that. And they're like, what else can I do with video games? It's going to be fun. My game's going to be fun to play, but it's going to do more. And so we start seeing these really powerful themes throughout the games that they make. We've had games that help you battle depression. We've had games that help you build empathy so you can understand the people that you meet. We've had games where the kids kind of wrote a game about their own experience being a bully, but then they wrote another chapter about where you play as the bully. So you get to see both sides, so you can empathize and be like, why do people act out and what are the reasons? I think these are some really incredible critical thinking skills that require you to kind of step into these shoes and make these games as creative directors. But at the end of the day, if we have more discussions on a larger scale about how video games can really shape society and shape culture and shape the conversations that we're having, if we want to push the frontier, as you will, and bring more problem solvers into our industry, we have to talk about, going beyond the entertainment, because it's just like TV. I like to bring that parallel a lot, like TV and movies. And if we say all movies are just for fun, that's absolutely not true. There's a lot of film media out there that does so much more. So I think we just need to have more conversations about this. And at camp, we've been pretty successful. If you go back and look at the games that have come out at camp, it's pretty evident that there's so much possible that we haven't seen with games just yet.
Congresswoman Clarke, this is a video game conference, and so I'd love to know what role video games have played either in your life, family, or friends or colleagues. just the impact of games as you see it.
Absolutely. Well, I haven't been a modern day user of video games, but I will tell you that as sort of a stress reliever in undergrad, I was a huge video game player, and that was at the early stages. So we're talking Pac-Man, we're talking some of the Space Invaders, some of the games that a lot of folks, the original Atari games, okay?
Right.
Um, and, again, it was stress reliever, it was dexterity, it was hand-eye coordination, competitiveness, right? And I did wonder, how was this created? And as part of that is, I tell people, the great thing about science is the analytical ability that you gain from your inquisitiveness, and so skills become transferable in so many different directions. But I have not been a huge gamer in sort of my adult years, if you will, or more mature adult years. But I can definitely appreciate the Candy Crushers out there and all the other folks who are creating ways in which we can maximize the use of games for training, education, for virtual learning. I think that the sky is the limit. And I think that women and girls can play an integral role given our lived experiences to help create solutions through gaming that can be applied in practical everyday experiences. So my hat's off to Laila and the work that she is doing with girls and young folk who, again, it opens the world of possibility for so many, not only just in the gaming space, but in the overall educational space, the social space, and the ability to analyze the world around you.
And Laila, maybe you might share either a game that you love or a game that one of your participants created that really impacted you in the few minutes we have left.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love talking about Shredded Secrets. I touched on it a little bit. It's the game where you get to play the kid being bullied, but also the bully. And it's actually a game that takes place in middle school. So you get to play four different characters. You're the girl who's getting bullied, the person bullying you, a teacher who's going through some tough time in their personal life, and then another student who's failing class and is really stressed out by it. So it's really interesting because like you might go to school with these people or you might have grown up with these people. And a lot of times, like when you play the chapters, you are playing as that one character. So you get to see everything from their point of view and the things that they care about and how like the world might seem like it's you versus the world. And then you play as a different character and you see they're dealing with a whole other set of issues and how you thought they were being mean to you, but they were really just acting out because they had something else going on in their life and they didn't know how to emotionally express that. And I think that game was incredibly powerful and it really stood out to me because you think that kids can't see these things. They can't see that people around them might be suffering or what they might be going through, but they are. And not only did these kids make this game, but they also wanted other people to play it and step in someone else's shoes. The tagline of the game is step in someone else's shoes because they might be having a tougher day than you or something like that. And I think that's a really powerful message, especially given the further isolated world that we've been living in the last year that we've had where we're kind of in the confines of our homes and we're all kind of just being like, oh, this sucks, but it sucks so much more for so many more people. And I think we can only solve the problems that we have and try to reach out and help people as we can. So the end resolution of the game is really nice too, and I'm not going to spoil it. It's out there on Steam. It's
Don't
coming out
spoil
on
it.
some console. Yeah, and just pitching the kids game here.
Well,
But yeah, it's games like that that
thank
just give
you.
you a lot of hope. Yeah.
I want to thank each of you for this really important conversation, and I want to thank GamesBeat for giving us the space to do it.